Good morning. My name is David Johnson, and it is a pleasure and an honour to be presenting for the Nutrition Network. I am a brain and spinal neurosurgeon. I remain in busy clinical practice consulting 3 days a week, which also includes large group seminar consultations, and I'm in the operating theatre 2 days a week. I see a lot of patients at the cold front of disease every week. I am presenting for the Noakes Foundation because it does sadden me and at times frustrates me that as a profession on a global scale we are failing our patients. I am a passionate believer that our current disease care model must adopt a paradigm shift approach towards true healthcare. And this is why. So you can see that the current state of health globally is glaringly concerning. Unfortunately, relying on our government, the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, hospitals, and the vast majority of doctors and allied health professionals working to effect this change is an exercise in futility. What will work, and what is very slowly working, is nutritional education at the grassroots level. The community, the mums and dads, school kids, teachers, butchers, grocery store owners, and our primary care physicians, our new healthcare graduates, and also our old dogs, and that's us, that may need to learn some new tricks. We need to speak the same language with one simple, unbiased, fundamental message. Outside of my clinic, I actively do this through a community-based platform co-founded with other equally passionate doctors, and we call it the Doctor's Choice Low Carb Cafe, whereby educational material accompanies a low carb healthy fat menu selection. Being healthy is very simple. It's not complex as one may think from the millions of web pages of health advice just mouse clicks away, and from the tsunami of chronic disease that we are witnessing in the modern industrialised world. When conditions such as diabetes affect so many people, the likelihood that a multitude of causes are at play is very slim. This is Occam's principle. Why can't we rely on our elected leaders? Because in fact our politicians are not our leaders at all. They are our followers, and they will merely backflip on policy that keeps them in office. And what keeps them in office is your vote. If the wider community majority want a sugar tax, then our pseudo leaders will implement it to remain in office. If the powerful commercial sugar industry and food manufacturers are allowed to continue muddying the waters with million-dollar marketing campaigns with pseudo-scientific claims that mask the dangers of its immensely profitable product from the community, then nothing will change. The paradigm shift has to be community-based intervention. I've been fortunate enough to spend time with Professor Noakes, and I believe that he has a similar philosophy, and I credit him for salvaging my own health around 8 years ago, because I was just as confused as my patients about how to be healthy. I thought I was healthy, although the common metrics we use to measure health were deteriorating, and I did not understand why. I found this photo of myself here from 2010, and I cannot believe that at that time I thought I was healthy. This is more recently. Importantly, the nutrition comes first and the fitness follows, not the other way around. This was my healthy breakfast 10 years ago, and how I wanted to stave off disease. I was very active, running, swimming, surfing, tennis, almost daily, so fitness or sedentary doctor lifestyle was not the influencing factor. My own GP cautioned me about failing a life insurance health check while I was trying to be healthy. This was really the beginning of my own medical epiphany that has led me to be here today talking to you. What do I mean by disease care, and why do I think our current medical system is failing us? Let's look at some statistics. Modern medicine, with all its miracles, does not prevent 90% of people suffering from and then dying from chronic disease. The big four: coronary disease and cerebrovascular disease, diabetes and cancer. We can see from this data that people no longer die healthy. We exist in an unhealthy state, propped up and supported by the wonders of modern medicine, which are driven by commerce and symptom control, not a desire to restore true health. Think of all the medications, procedures and therapy and support that patients consume just to get through their day, and the inordinate economic burden that comes with it. But this economic burden also means an economic windfall for many. How to do your bit? Firstly, you have to be passionate about running this gauntlet, because along with the satisfaction that you are making a real difference comes a lot of frustration, disappointment, and potentially high-stress challenges. Ask some of our nutrition educators like Dr. Gary Fettke and Tim Noakes himself. Secondly, is teaching people to understand that they are lost. So I think I've painted that picture with my own epiphany, and if 2 out of 3 of the world are lost, including medically trained professionals, of course our own patients are going to be, because there are many roadmaps, and no matter how motivated, disciplined and supported you are, if you have the wrong roadmap, you will still fail to get to your destination. Once you have the correct roadmap, it's easy and everything just falls into place. My talk now is going to focus on how to give your unsuspecting patient the simple, easy to read and correct roadmap. In-office consulting, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday begins at about 8 a.m. with my first patient, usually with spine region pain. They are coming to see me about the possible requirement for spine surgery. And this is what they look like. In the waiting room, they will have already filled in a demographic form with this information attached. Everybody gets one, because nearly everybody needs one. Now, my specialty is at the pointy end of the spear of medicine, and patients are interested in what marvels of neurosurgical pain management and spine surgery I can offer them to relieve them of pain. This is when our unexpected intervention begins. We have to take a step back here and talk about why they are in this current state of health or disease. Help them identify with the root cause. This is, of course, how every other industry addresses system failures. Root cause analysis. Why not with all our patients and chronic disease? It always leads back to deficits in one or more of the 4 major foundational pillars of health: nutrition, proficient movement, quality sleep, and stress management. So it becomes logical to the patient that if I perform an expensive, dangerous, often painful surgical procedure without also integrating a repair to these foundational pillars of health, then they will in fact be no healthier. It's like squeezing a tap tighter. The problem still exists and the procedure will fail. Now, the most common broken pillar is nutrition. Some patients accept this, many do not, and respond with, "No, we eat very healthy in our house." Be ready for objection from patients. Support this with excellent. So you don't eat junk food, that's great. That means chocolate, ice cream, donuts, and lollies are not contributing to your poor health. So let's look at the food that you are eating then, because if you're not eating junk food, as you pointed out, just how healthy are the foods that you are eating? Maybe they aren't that healthy at all. Maybe you are following the food pyramid exceptionally well. Now, the next few slides are about as scientific as you need to get with patients. Explain what flour, starch, cereal, and grains are to patients. Explain that sugar is fructose and glucose, 2 molecules, and our dietary complex carbohydrates most often are long chains of glucose, biochemically very similar to table sugar. Our body doesn't distinguish between a potato and a Mars bar once the glucose train is broken down. Compare the structure of starch and flour to glucose. Reinforce the train of glucose is carbohydrate, which is starch, flour, bread, rice, and pasta, and all those things you do eat and that you may believe are good for you. These foods are in fact your hidden junk food. How does your body deal with glucose in the blood? Normally, in an adult blood volume, there is approximately 1 teaspoon of glucose. We have to keep this tightly controlled, otherwise we will get very sick. Just like our body temperature, our pH or our acidity, and our hydration is very tightly controlled. Now imagine eating a potato, which is approximately 12 to 14 teaspoons of glucose. So insulin, which is a hormone, is released and it is doing a job it was never meant to do. It's always being made to lower blood sugar. That's not in its job description, but it's got to do it. So like a disgruntled employee, it begins to sabotage your business. And that is no different to sabotaging your health. How does your body get sabotaged? Our bodies become insulin resistant. The disgruntled insulin worker putting in overtime doesn't get the job done efficiently anymore. A lot of insulin is required to do the job, in contrast to just a little bit. So after many years of eating these hidden junk foods, lots of insulin has been required to complete this task of lowering blood sugar, whereas previously only a little bit of insulin was required. Hence, early on you were insulin sensitive, but now you are insulin resistant. Physiologically, this phenomenon is called tolerance, and it happens for many molecules in our blood. Painkillers are a good example. If we expose ourselves to a lot of it, we become resistant to them. They don't subdue pain like they used to when we first started using them even at small doses. Insulin is a very important hormone, and having high levels of insulin floating about, which we can measure, is not healthy. The other functions of insulin go into overdrive, fat storage in particular, accounting for the potbelly of visceral fat deposition, because our visceral fat is a bit different to peripheral fat. When we are metabolically and hormonally unhealthy, there is a preference for accumulation in the abdominal organs before the peripheral subcutaneous region. That is actually one of the telltale signs that your condition is not just from eating too much good food and not exercising enough, because in these circumstances, like a healthy sumo wrestler, the fat builds up everywhere. Remember that body weight is not necessarily the best metric of health. Healthy eating, big appetites, and big people are not afflicted by chronic disease. Insulin resistance also means glucose intolerance. The intolerance principle means that your body is currently unable to tolerate glucose. Just like nuts or an antibiotic, if you're intolerant, it's pretty sensible to stay away. It's not all bad news though, because after a while you lose that intolerance and you surely can reintroduce carbohydrates if you want to, but you probably won't because of the way it has transformed you. Some patients will raise this as a point of conjecture because often they are on the knife edge between skepticism and praise. Now, what about my hubby here who eats terribly and he's a rake, or my neighbour, or look at the Chinese, they eat rice every day. These slides clearly show how a glucose intolerant person, I use the word allergic here, although not strictly correct, responds to all forms of glucose containing food differently to someone who is not allergic or intolerant. Be clear to explain that the diseases you suffer from tell us that you are allergic or intolerant, and therefore you should stay clear of glucose until your allergy settles down. Patients understand the word allergy a little bit better than intolerant. Now, just because there are populations that eat higher levels of carbohydrate doesn't mean that they too would not benefit from low carbohydrate, healthy fat diets. That is an unscientific conclusion to make. And in fact, what we are seeing is one of the highest rates of growing obesity occurring in China now, as thousands of years of adapted insulin sensitivity is being corroded by industrialization and modernization of rural lifestyles that once maintained carbohydrate tolerance and insulin sensitivity. The fact that they have tolerated greater amounts of carbohydrate and have remained healthy is really a testament to the human physiology and its adaptability. We don't conclude that because native PNG Highlanders don't wear shoes that it's okay for everybody to not wear shoes. Of course not. You'll get cut up really badly. The only reason they can handle no shoes is many years of adapting to their environment, developing thickened ivory-like plantar skin. And likewise, if the natives started wearing shoes, like Chinese eating less carbs, doesn't imply that it would be harmful for them. And in fact, is going to be a requirement to slow down the growing rate of obesity in China. So what food should I eat, Doc? This is great because you've engaged your patient now once they ask this question. There are only 3 types of food: fat, carbohydrate, and protein. So if carbs are off the table in metabolically unhealthy patient, this leaves fat and protein. Our protein requirement is pretty simple for patients to understand, and it's stable for most patients unless they are bodybuilding or entering strongman competitions, which I'm yet to come across in my spine pain clinics. In my practice, I rarely need to focus on advising more or less protein intake. In this cohort of patients with metabolic syndrome, the autoregulation of this does not appear to be corrupted. So this brings us to the fat part of our consultation. The dual use of the word fat to describe the macronutrient and people who are unhealthily overweight is massively unfortunate. If only we used triacylglycerol instead of the word fat. The scientists and the public would probably not have been duped into thinking that this macronutrient was the bad guy harming our health. Natural fat, or triacylglycerol, is the essential and ideal energy source for human beings. It's the energy source our metabolism has evolved to run off. Maybe obesity should be renamed carbesity, because believing that eating fat is causation for the state of being fat has created the biggest nutrition conundrum ever recognised. So you want me to eat fatty food and eggs which are high in cholesterol, says our patient. This is challenging because fat phobia is deeply entrenched, thanks in large part to Heart Foundation recommendations, which incidentally have strong ties to Procter & Gamble, the original manufacturers of Crisco industrial seed oil, decades ago, before coronary heart disease and the specialty of cardiology barely existed. I show patients laminated research data here about saturated fat, cholesterol survival, and coronary events from the World Health Organization, the PURE study, PREDIMED study, Swedish National Study on Aging and Care, and many more, to get the point across that healthy natural fats and cholesterol are safe. I like to explain that the brain, which is something I know a little bit about, is 2% of body weight, but accounts for 23% of total body cholesterol. So 1/4 of the brain's solid substance is composed of cholesterol. So I am justified in getting a bit upset when my patients are given statins that lower cholesterol into their boots, and I ask them that if their doctor said that they were too tall, would they allow themselves to be chopped off at the ankles? Who said you are too tall? The same principle holds for cholesterol in nearly all cases. Just like gigantism, there are exceptions, but your body finds its homeostatic functional cholesterol level to keep you healthy. Very, very rarely do we need to lower it with drugs. And in addition, most of the cholesterol in your body is created by the liver, not ingested. Why is this? Because it's an incredibly important molecule. Our metabolic processes couldn't leave it to chance that we would get enough through our diet. I also like to point out that if we adopt a healthy fat, low-carb diet, lots of things begin to happen, such as decreased visceral fat, improved blood pressure, improved triglyceride, improved waist-to-height ratio, improved fasting insulin levels, improved blood sugar levels and control, reduction in insulin requirement or oral hypoglycemic medication. Now, these are all signs that you're getting healthier. Is it really plausible that if all of these things are on the improve, that this alteration to your nutrition is harmful? Is it likely that although all of these fantastic metrics of health are getting better, that because of your increased healthy fat intake, you are now more at risk of a heart attack? It makes no sense to me, and after this explanation, it will make no sense to your patient either, and they will be reassured. Visceral fat does bad things to us. That's inflammation. Inflammation is like internal rust or oxidation, and just how rust can break down structures slowly, it can do this in our body in different locations, which result in different disease. But really, they are all manifestations of the one disease that we call metabolic syndrome. Example, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, gout, stroke, heart attack, dementia, cancer, soft tissue integrity fibromyalgia, raised triglycerides, and aberrations in HDL cholesterol. These are the simple messages I want my patients to be able to go home with and ponder. There is so much preoccupation about what is the right thing to do. It should be simple. Ignore the calorie counting. Exercise has very little to do with metabolic health. There are obvious junk foods and the hidden pseudo-healthy junk foods laden with glucose. Which leads us into this next point of glucose allergy. Obviously, avoid it at all costs until the intolerance improves. Healthy natural fats have no recognised or proven physiological mechanism of clogging your arteries. You cannot buy health with a commercial product. I'm not worried about your overall body weight as a measure of health. Once the healthy wheel is turning, it unavoidably gains momentum, and the gains are synergistic. Discipline is required to take the first step, but thereafter, I firmly believe in the 80-20 rule. A baby can be healthy with breast milk for 2 years, receiving food that its evolutionary DNA makes it seek out. A bushman or islander isolated from modern society will have good health with no dietetic education, textbooks or internet. Modern society and commercial self-serving interests actively corrupts our natural instinct that would otherwise lead us to real food and healthy choices. Don't worry about calories. A calorie is not just a calorie. Calories are different based on their molecular structure. They affect our neuroendocrine system vastly differently. If you eat lots and lots of good calories, you may be big and still metabolically healthy. Compare this with bad calories, such as poorly formulated, cheap calorie restriction diets. Yes, they will make you drop weight, but your health plummets too. Also, all of these weight loss strategies fail in the long term. We rarely would measure the essential clean water we drink in a day. Why then would we measure the essential healthy calories we eat in a day? Just like clean water, if you eat clean food, your body's metabolism and appetite is exquisitely, tightly self-regulated. This is what we refer to as homeostasis, no different to the core temperature and pH balance your body maintains without your conscious involvement. Many patients will fall back on a lack of exercise as their excuse for poor health. This message is false and has probably been permeated by commercial food industry aligning themselves with high-profile sporting associations like McDonald's in Little Athletics and nearly every other professional sporting event. Distortion of the truth becomes unavoidable as people playing sport become associated with healthy sporting imagery. This is simple advertising 101. In reality, poor diet is linked to sedentary behaviour because of the endocrine effect of unstable blood glucose, adrenocorticoids, insulin and leptin resistance. The sedentary behaviour is merely an association with poor health, not causative. People who eat well with stable and basal insulin are able to be more active. When you take a step back and look at the profoundly powerful effects of hormones, how can obesity not be hormonally driven? It's just wrong, immoral and unethical to blame a sedentary patient who is physiologically unable to exercise and shift the blame away from poor quality food. It's no different to saying to someone with Cushing's disease, exercise more to lose weight. Cushing's disease is in fact a very good endocrine model for metabolic syndrome. Instead of a lifestyle bringing about the hormonal disturbance, a pituitary adenoma does the damage. Accepting the corticoid effects, the clinical manifestations are identical. There is no money to be made in selling true health. Remember, health is not a product and cannot be bought. We've had access to true health for millions of years. Today, we are just paying someone for the delivery service. You don't need to be a Shaolin monk to succeed at this. 80-20 is unlikely to compromise health, especially once your insulin sensitivity is re-established, with maybe a 90-10 ratio when you set off following your health roadmap. But sadly, thinking that eating good food 20% of the time and poor food 80% of the time will never work, and you may as well eat the junk food 100% of the time. Our bodies are robust and can handle moderate indulgences, but compare a heavy smoker occasionally going for a run versus a good athlete occasionally having a smoke. 80-20 is pretty luxurious, and I must say my breakfast meals would be closer to 99%, 1%. Not just because low insulinemic food or LCHF is good for me, but because it's delicious. So I hope that whets your appetite and gives you confidence and strategies that can be implemented for every patient that walks in the door, no matter if you are a neurosurgeon, rheumatologist, hand surgeon, or GP. We are all doctors, and we have an obligation to understand simple, fundamental metabolic principles and nutrition concepts that we have all learnt at medical school, but may have forgotten out of contextual relevance. These basic principles underpin the success of every medical professional's treatment and the health of their patient. Imagine how we could transform the health of the planet from the sorry state it is in now with the epidemic of chronic disease if we all conveyed this message as uniformly as we all prescribe penicillin for pneumonia. Thank you very much.